want to open this chat up. Okay. All right, so my name is Indra. I'm a second year now in my PhD at UTS. I'm from the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences. So you can imagine I'm going to take a bit more of a social research perspective to chatbots. And as you can see in the title, Voicebots too. So I'll be going into what Bora described as more voice-controlled chatbots. So as Matt said, I am a librarian at the very moment. I work facing clients at UTS LIbrary, helping students and staff do all anything related to their study needs. As well, I did do some work with IT right now. I'm not working with them anymore, so I'll give you an update on the chatbot projects that Matt mentioned. So here's what I'm planning to talk to in this presentation. As well, I've shared these slides with Matt, and I'm sure he will share them with the group as well. And of course, just a reminder, please leave any questions in the chat so Matt can share them with us in the Q&A. So I have talked about this topic at a few conferences quite recently, and some journal articles I've published on the matter. You can have a look at the list here for future reference. And you can also learn more about my research by watching this video. When you're in the PDF, you can click on this picture and it will take you to YouTube, where you can watch my Visualize Your Thesis competition entry, which I got second place. So getting back to our UTS bots. A bit about how I got there in the first place. I had finished my bachelor degree with Information and Media, which is the IKM stream at UTS. And I was working as a librarian. And it seemed that the IT department at UTS had approached the library and asked, do you want a chatbot? We're working with a vendor and we're building them. So throughout this process, I was put on the project, and I was learning a lot about the basic architecture and looking at more of an information professional way of how to organize, present, design the information in a way that I wouldn't be confined by the IT stuff. I sound really bad saying IT stuff. Sounds like I know no IT things at all. So I think Bora, talking from his experience as a vendor, it is very important who you are working with. I find that it can be quite expensive to build a chatbot for your own organization, and there can be a lot of technical difficulties. It is very sensitive, as I found out. So with UTS, you can see on this screen, this is one of the bots that we made. It is student-facing, public-facing. It's to help the student services team who answer questions from students like, how do I get a new ID card? What do I do about graduation? How do I get my timetable? A lot of common questions that can be found on their website or many of UTS websites. And I was helping them seeing how many chats were successful and how to visualize that. So that's one aspect that an information professional can do in chatbots, is to how to present metas. The second bot was, I was working to train a group of people, the HR staff, to create their own bot. They were having a lot of problems, a lot of emails coming into the same questions, very simple to answer, but they're being bombarded with them. So as an information professional in that context, I was producing information documents, doing workshops with them, explaining the IT architecture in very simple terms so they could own their own bot. As well, I was trying to establish some group practice, because it's not just one person making a bot, it's multiple people, and it starts to sound like multiple people if it's not very coherent. And you can find a lot of overlap in some of the coding in the bot, which can eventually break it. So working with a team with a bot was quite a challenge. And I forgot what my next slide is. Yeah, so the last one brings us back to the library, where I was designing content for the bot. So like I've emphasized, chatbots were being looked at not to replace the people, but rather to help us answer those less than 5-minute interactions so we could get on with bigger and better things. So the first step for creating the library chatbot was to collect data from our users. This was to inform how we're going to design it. So here you can see one of the apps we use at the library when we're sitting at the help desk. For every interaction, we mark it as a statistic, and it can indicate to us what areas were less than 5 minutes, what type of questions. So other data sources we could collect information about what our users wanted to ask us was our online chat. We man this from 8 a.m. We staff it, from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. And we do have a lot of similar questions, but we also have a lot of complex questions. You can see this is an example of a sample one. You can see what kind of language the students would speak to us with, and you can see maybe spelling and sentences isn't that great. And another source of information that we were managing was our question and answers website. So here you can see everyone wanted to know about the same thing, said it in different ways. Can be quite complex, quite simple how they ask us. And this is an example of one of what we would reply to those answers. So it's great that Bora gave the example of the library and books he brought up. I just want to speak to a few challenges that we found and how we try to solve them from an information perspective. So I'll explain them on this page. This is my personal documentation, but a group could work on these documents before you go into the bot, before you go into training, the machine learning. I broke the bot a couple of times because I was messing with it, just typing some stuff in. So it's important that you plan. It's important that you plan ahead. I see Matt's just told me my voice is breaking up.
Only occasionally. It seems to be okay. Indra, keep on trucking.
Thank you. I'll speak a bit slower. I'm so sorry. My area is so bad for the internet. Okay. So as you can see in the middle column, these are all the ways a student could ask me on the live chat, at the desk, on the Q&A, how do I book a room? And on the left, you can see this is the piece of code. Bora was explaining how it goes from the channels to the databases, all the backend infrastructure of it. That code would go into there and bring up the text on the right. So this is what the bot would present to the client. So you can see one strategy we tried to use was not just to answer their question, but to rather guess what other information needs do they have related to that question. So what we've put here is a link to the actual room booking site and a link to the library map, and then a link to the map of UTS in general, in case they've never been to the library before. So we were trying to minimize how many back and forth responses with the chatbot that would eventually, the client would notice that it's not very fantastic at conversation. So second challenge we wanted to overcome is the idea of polysemic language. So this is when a word that sounds the same has different meanings, sounds or written the same. So book is the best example. Here we're saying, how do I book a room? But you can imagine in a library space, there's many book related things. Where is my book? How do I borrow a book? How do I reference this book? And it can be really difficult to untrain the artificial intelligence and focus it on something else. So these are very fine-tuned contexts that you really have to pay attention for. And maybe one of the other speakers can speak to that and maybe how they find a solution for it. So I'll leave this here, but I do like this example. It's quite funny. And you can read about these different challenges as well. And I've got a reference list at the end too. So what helped us as well was referring to a tone of voice document. If you're from an organization, you might already have one of these from your marketing team. This helps to get everyone working on the bots on a similar page. This is the example of the UTS one. So that brings us to voice, tone of voice document, voice. So Voicebots and chatbots, as Boris said, can be used interchangeably. I like to, in my research, refer to them under an umbrella term of social artificial intelligence. So their user adoption is usually more reliant on their social identity. As Boris said, people are quite sensitive towards them, a bit unforgiving, because like other representations of human life, it is very similar. And you've probably heard of the term uncanny valley. It's a great way to describe interaction with them. So voice bots are do have more nuances to them. You know, they're separate to another device. They kind of live in their own separate body. And a lot of studies I have found do focus on how we can use the technology to help our clients and what is the technical ability of these machines? Is it the fastest? Is it the most accurate? Does it connect to the most things? But my research will be more looking at, users and usability of the machines, looking at how people use them in their everyday life. So this brings me to just a few points that I'll be trying to cover in my PhD research, and just some stimulating questions to yourself if you're thinking about chatbots or voice bots or social artificial intelligence. Other than technical improvements, how can we improve user experiences? So one thing I'm looking at is, how do people perceive the artificial intelligent identity? And how do we, gossip to other people about them? How do we construct this idea of them? And the commonality of them always, or usually being female voiced by default. and having a particular sassy and sexualized personality. And what other social roles can they assume? And I guess in business language, what other use cases can this intelligence personify? Some research has described them as being servants or even masters to the humans they control by making them speak in a certain way. People refer to them as pets. They're smart, but they're not as smart as us. And even I like the one that refers to them as butlers, where they're in control of telling all the other devices in your house what to do. Another way I'm looking at this is, how do they change our behaviors? Do they change us when we're interacting with other people? Do we learn any behaviors off them that transfer? It's a nice study there. I recommend reading, it's quite funny. And lastly, how do we react to them in ways that aren't social and that's not around language or conversation? How do people maybe have different facial expressions or body language? This will tell us a bit more about human interaction with voice spoken bots. So lastly, just to share how I'm going to investigate all these things is I'll be looking at diverse groups of people, from people native to the digital to the digitally excluded, from elders. In particular, I'm looking at a computer group with some elderly, and I'm taking Alexa and asking some kids to draw who they think she is, and as well talking to those who've been living with her in a long-term relationship for over 6 months. So these are the definitions I use in my research. I think there is quite a bit of mix-ups between the word bot. It's often used everywhere. So if you want an intro to some of the different definitions, here's a good slide for you can keep. And there's my references if you want to read up on any of those articles, and you can, what did I put there? LinkedIn and my student email if you'd like to get in touch with me after all this. All right, thank you for your attention, and I'll be waiting for Q&A. Back to you, Matt.
Thanks very much, Indra. That was great. And I think a very useful contrast to Bora's session.
Yeah.
So let me just take that away and stop that.